I have a PhD in criminal justice, and I've taught for over 30 years as a criminology professor. In addition to that, I have actually been hogtied by jailers, thrown onto a cold jailhouse floor, and staring at a hole with sewage in it. Why? Because I had a medical crisis. I got my master's degree in criminal justice from the University of South Carolina, and I took a job at a death row prison as assistant to the warden. During my first 6 months there, we would have the first execution in over 20 years in South Carolina. Nobody on the warden's staff had ever experienced an execution. So it was an extremely stressful time. I ended up going to a family physician because I was having trouble with sleep, and the family physician put me on an antidepressant. From there, I left the job at the prison and took a job as a United States probation officer. And in doing that, I was sent for training in Miami by federal probation. Never made it to the training. I made it to a hotel bar where I got into an argument with a patron. I thought that I was on the set for the crime drama Miami Vice in Miami. That was a delusion. A delusion is a fixed, false belief without probability. The police were called. They took me, and I was hospitalized in Miami. I was placed in 4-point restraints, and they agreed to release me if I would go back to South Carolina and be hospitalized there. I did. Even though the police handled it appropriately by linking me to treatment, the consequences were devastating. When I got back to South Carolina, I encountered a psychiatrist who told me that the worst thing the family physician could have ever done was put me on an antidepressant. He diagnosed me as having bipolar disorder, and he said it was like pouring jet fuel onto a fire in terms of worsening my mania. From there, federal probation came down to the hospital, my supervisor, and he forced me to resign my job for medical reasons. My wife came to the hospital and told me she was leaving me, and she ultimately divorced me. I contemplated suicide, but thankfully I didn't do so. I went back to my mother's in North Carolina, and I actually started teaching at a community college, criminal justice courses, because I already had a master's degree. And also a mentor encouraged me to apply to PhD programs. I did. Got accepted, Claremont Graduate School in California. I went to Claremont, earned my PhD while bipolar on medication. And from there, I took a job in Maine as a full-time criminal justice professor, and then I came to Florida. When I came to Florida, I had to find a new doctor. I started teaching in Florida, found a new doctor, and the new doctor decided that I wasn't mentally ill. So he took me off my medication. And how I wanted to believe him, because I was so ashamed and so embarrassed about having a mental illness. But unfortunately, he was wrong. Within 2 months, my new wife and myself, we went to South Carolina to a football game. I was so irrational that I thought I could control the players on South Carolina's team and they would beat the other team. They didn't. By the third quarter, I became frustrated, and my new wife and I left the game, and we went to a condominium complex where we were staying. And there, it all started crashing in on me. I was back in South Carolina where the conspirators had cost me my job. So what did I need to do? In my mind, I reasoned that I needed to go undercover. How would I do that? I would get myself arrested. So I went skinny dipping in an unoccupied swimming pool at the condominium complex. The police were called. My wife told them, she said, "This is my husband. He has a PhD in criminal justice. He is a criminology professor. He worked in this city at the prison up the street. He also was a federal probation officer in this city. A psychiatrist has mistakenly taken him off of his medication for bipolar disorder. Please help him." Their help for me was to take me directly to jail and not tell anyone at the jail about my condition. There, I ended up being assaulted and battered by a detainee in a holding cell. Also, I envisioned again that I was on a film set. I thought that the actors Jeff Bridges and Wesley Snipes were in the cell with me. Finally, the jailers started to realize they had a problem. What did they do? They hogtied me, they stomped me, they beat me, and they took me and they put me in a strip cell and threw me on the floor, and all that was in that cell was a hole in the floor for sewage. I started fishing through the sewage, and I pulled out the broken wristband of another detainee, and I thought, they've killed that guy in here, they're going to kill me. About that time, the cell door opened, and I was taken to the administrative area of the jail. A federal probation officer that I had worked with 8 years before had come down to the jail. He knew the magistrate, and he had me released to him, and he took me and had me hospitalized in Columbia. From there, this was certainly a breaking point for me in that I had told no one but significant others about my illness because I was so ashamed of it. Now, I could not go back to work as a professor in Florida on time, so I had to let them know that I had been hospitalized. Fortunately, academe was more forgiving than federal probation had been, and they let me come back when I was ready to come back. And from there, it was a breaking point, and it reminds me of the statement by Ernest Hemingway in A Farewell to Arms. He says, the world breaks us all, but in the end, some become strong at the broken places. And so, indeed, I finally viewed this as an opportunity to come out about my illness. But let me say this, when we talk about being arrested as a person with mental illness, if you look at statistics, the percentage estimates of persons with mental illness arrested at least once in their lifetime, 40 to 50% of persons with mental illness will be arrested at least once in their lifetime. I was fortunate. I had contacts that could help me, but we have a terrible community mental health system these days. And what happens is, another thing with persons with mental illness, only 1% of persons with severe mental illness will ever be linked to a violent act. That's contrary to sensationalized media reports. And actually, if they're properly linked to treatment, they're no more apt than the general population to commit a violent act. They're much more likely to be the victim of a violent crime than the perpetrator of a violent crime. Research proves that. And if you look at state hospital populations in America, in 1955, we hit our peak with 559,000 persons with mental illness in state hospitals. By 1980, it had dropped to less than 100,000 persons with mental illness in state hospitals because of expansion of due process rights and civil rights to persons with mental illness. But by the beginning of the year 2025, less than 40,000 persons with mental illness in hospitals. Why? Did we find a cure for mental illness? Oh no, we didn't find a cure for mental illness. What we did is we changed the address. America's 3 largest mental health facilities are jails, and there are many more people with mental illness in jails and prisons than there are in hospitals in America today. If you look at my reality, basically it was a change of address. I became a statistic. Yeah, I'd been hospitalized, but I ended up arrested and jailed. And if you look at this research by Fred Markowitz, Dr. Markowitz said that a predominance of private psychiatric hospital beds is significantly associated with increased arrest and crime rates. Why? The key word is private, because private facilities will not accept you if you don't have insurance, and furthermore, if you do have insurance and your insurance runs out, they'll kick you out on the street, where you come to the attention of criminal justice authorities, and they found it's much easier to take somebody to jail than to take them to a mental health facility. There, I actually finally got over my shame about being mentally ill, and I came to the conclusion if this could happen to me, something needed to be done. So there is a photo of me with Sheila Jackson Lee, and that's Kim Webdale. We testified before Congress. I joined the National Alliance on Mental Illness. I found it a safe place to come out about my illness, and we testified, and our panel's testimony got the first federal funding for mental health courts in America, where you have a judge who has knowledge of mental illness, and he's able to link persons with mental illness to treatment, and he has a docket of persons with mental illness instead of putting them into the criminal justice system. Unlike the magistrate I encountered in South Carolina, who, by the way, had a real estate background. He didn't know anything about mental illness. In Mandarin Chinese, the word crisis is represented by two symbols. One is danger, the other is opportunity. And if you think about it, in any crisis, whether you're mentally ill or not, yes, there can be danger, but there may be an opportunity to turn it into something positive and extricate yourself from difficulty. And I encourage you to look for that when you're facing a crisis. Lastly, Mark Twain once said that the two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. In my life, I believe I've found out why. And that is, I am no longer ashamed of being mentally ill. I'm ashamed of how people with mental illness are treated within our society. And we need to strive to link them to treatment as opposed to the criminal justice system. And I can tell you, as a criminology professor, I have published scholarly books, scholarly articles. I have trained criminal justice practitioners. I have trained psychiatrists, psychiatric residents. Basically, I have talked to anybody who will listen about trying to de-escalate situations with persons with mental illness, and for you to realize that they can be high-functioning individuals. And much of the training I've been involved with law enforcement involves bringing persons with mental illness in to talk to police officers, and the persons with mental illness are not in crisis. Oftentimes, the police have only seen persons with mental illness in crisis, and they don't understand that persons with mental illness can be highly functioning individuals and make contributions to society. And it's wonderful to see the change in attitudes when we bring persons with mental illness in, not to blame the cops, but to help the cops find solutions and to de-escalate situations. Thank you for your time. Good day.